Welcome to The Whole View. I'm Stacy Toth of Real Everything. I'm here each week to dive deeper into how we can find happiness and health inside and out through self love, body positivity, and discovering new ways to be our best selves. Before we get started, a reminder this podcast is for general educational purposes and is not intended to diagnose, advise, or treat any physical or mental illness. We always recommend that you see a licensed health professional accordingly. That said, I hope that today's show is not one that you need to see a medical professional for, because I am welcoming Isabelle Miller to The Whole View. She is a model, content creator, and an influencer based out of Los Angeles and has quickly gained a large following, captivating audiences with her alluring presence. And I'll let you go check out her social media: Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. We'll put the link in the show notes. You can find her on Instagram as Isabelle Miller X and see for yourself what we mean by alluring. But she also uses her platforms to share personal experiences and to give an intimate look into her life as a woman of color facing backlash in the public eye. And with that growing fan base is a commitment to make a positive impact. So Isabel is a force to be reckoned with, and I'm looking forward to hearing about her journey as she continues to make waves in the fashion and beauty world, which we have discussed extensively as being potentially harmful to people of color. So if you continue on to listening to the show, you'll also hear from Kai Washington, who is also a woman of color who works as a makeup artist in a similar industry. So I'm excited, Isabel, that you're here to kind of talk about what it's like on the other side of the camera and what that public backlash feels like, a little bit more about your story. So can you start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Of course. Well, first of all, thank you so much for, welcoming me on this beautiful show. So far, I've been a model for quite a bit. I would say around 4 years, and I went into it full time 3 years ago. And it was pretty impacted by COVID because once it started, everybody started paying more attention to quote unquote OnlyFans. And from there, my presence on there and Twitter grew. And I started getting a lot of people, followers, because naturally I just love making the sexier kind of content. So it was a lot of beautiful lingerie content and a lot of people gravitated to it. So that's how it all, started, blowing up all of a sudden, I'll say. And I didn't really expect for it to go this far, but I'm really grateful for the opportunities. And yeah, concerning that, with more popularity comes sometimes more criticism. And, sometimes people are going to make negative comments about your look and also negative comments about the nature of your profession. Because as funny as it is, society, especially male dominated spaces, love sexy women. But you'll be surprised how many negative comments OnlyFans girls get not only online, but also in public. Funny story, I was actually at a nail salon one day and I overheard a conversation of this lady being on the phone and saying, well, I'm not like one of these OnlyFans S words. So it was kind of like, okay, well, this is not a hierarchy. But as society is, people often perceive everything as a hierarchy to make themselves feel better. So it's this that dichotomy of we love beautiful women, we love the sex appeal, but also we don't want too much of that. We gotta bring them down a notch a bit because that's not okay. That's wrong. You shouldn't be doing that. And it's kind of like a lot of it is about shoulds and this false sense of morality because, what's immoral about being online in a certain way versus you doing whatever you do in real life. But like I said, it's a hierarchy thing, and people always want to look somewhere, look some ways to kick down the person that they feel somewhat superior to. And a lot of time comes into looks as well because bigger bodies sometimes, a lot of times actually are treated in a not so kind way. And a lot of times people online will be like, well, you should lose weight. You should look this way. You should look that way. And as interesting as it is, there's also this trend of women being curvier, having bigger boobs, bigger butts, and etc., and tiny waist. And people also expect you to fall into that category. So it's also these comments of, well, she looks better curvier, or else she's too skinny. So either you're too skinny, you're too big, there's always something, once again, to try to bring down these women a notch. And it's been quite interesting to be on this side of the quote unquote arguments and comments because thankfully I've decided personally to not pay attention to it and to really do as I wish because at the end of the day, this is my career, this is my presence. And somebody else's opinion does not have to affect me. And as well as I had to look at, okay, who's saying that? Who's commenting on my looks? Who's commenting on my body? Who's commenting on my hair or etc. or commenting on my presence? What do these people exactly have more than I do? You know? And why do they put their energy on you or me to make these, asinine comments that really don't mean anything to me? Because at the end of the day, my appearance, I'm in charge of it. And I will be the one to decide what's best for me. So the fact that they go out of their way to get these little inputs definitely says more about them than it does about me.
I am so impressed with everything you just said. I feel like it just needs to be the whole show. I'm like, okay, we just answered all the questions and conversation that I wanted to have, like mic drop moment. I would love for listeners to know. I know we talked a little bit about the show, but I'm sure listeners are wondering, based on your accent, where you're from. Can you give us a little bit of history about younger you before we dive into like your current career? And I want to pick apart some of the things that you talked about, but tell us a little bit more about your background.
Well, of course, I would love to share that. Okay, so the backstory is I was born in West Africa. I was born in Senegal, but I am of Togolese descent. So my family is originally from Togo, but we live in different countries and we've moved to New York years ago. And now I've decided to live in California. So that's, what does it call them again? The Cliff Notes version of it. But to go into more details, growing up, I was always kind of like, really, just the best way my mom describes it, I was really unique and I was different because I was really calm as a child. And I think to this day, people will say so as well. And I love spending time by myself. I love reading books, watching documentaries, kind of explore the world in different ways. And I think over time that really stuck to me because I like to really experience the world as it is and go into different facets of what life brings to us. So that also brought me to this profession because originally my life track, I was supposed to go into like a professional, corporate career, working as a user interface designer or graphic designer or even industrial designer because that's what I majored in college initially. And I did my toe into the startup world. I did intern and did some freelance work here and there. But I decided, you know what? I have to be sincere with myself and realize that my true interest lied elsewhere. So that's why I put more energy into modeling online and, show the world, maybe how beautiful I was, etc. But I don't think that was really the crux of it. I think it was more about self-expression because in the corporate world, you are told what to do. You're told, okay, this client needs this, our company needs that. This is what needs to be done. And you gotta feel like a fly on the wall because there's not much of your true self out there. So I've decided, you know what? I need something more than that. I also need more independence. I don't want to have to, you know, live in the city, take the train, go to the office, get back, go to the, what was a bar, the club, whatever, and then do the same thing over and over again. So I'm not a huge fan of routines because I think every day brings something new. Everything in life brings something new. And I've never really been keen on being put in a box for a long time. So sometimes I like to say, especially recently, that I like to flow like water. And there's no need for a water to be in just one type of bottle or one type of cup because whatever it is. And that's what I've been doing for a long time.
I think that says a lot about you, and I will validate your presence does seem very calming. And there's something magical about that for people like myself who I feel like vibrating energy all the time, right? And I seek the calm in my own personal space that you bring to the table. So I love that you are this calm presence. And I think that it really allows you to have a lot of the perspective that you're sharing, right? Like being able to reflect on criticism and say, that's really about somebody else. That's not about me. Like, not a lot of people can do that. And I imagine that it is that self reflection and that calming nature that you have that allows you to do it. I couldn't help but think when you were talking earlier about, some people say my body's too big. Some people say my body's too small. Everybody has an opinion. And it's never just, I like you for you as you are, how you want to show up in the world. I couldn't help but think, I don't know if you've seen the Barbie movie, but I'm her
Oh, I did. I was
she's a
about to mention it as
yes,
well.
exactly. So I just couldn't help but think because it's, as we're recording, it is very popular culture right now. And a lot of people are talking about the speech that America Ferrera gave in the movie where she talks about how as a woman, you cannot do anything right. Like the expectation is that you need to be a boss, but not be bossy, that you need to be, bigger or smaller, like all these dichotomies that the world and society expects. And it's impossible to achieve. And when you were talking, I couldn't help but think like all these comments that you're getting are from people who have that expectation for you. And you're able to kind of set yourself aside and be like, I'm gonna focus on what I want, and I hope that you realize, like, how powerful and amazing that is to just feel this way in your skin of, like, I'm gonna do the thing that I wanna do that feels right to me. This is my career path. This is where I wanna go, and if someone doesn't like it, they don't need to be here for it. I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about the double standard, because I do think that there is some of that in white influencer community, but when I look at especially like traditional white females posing in their bikinis or their lingerie on the internet and the responses and comments that I see to people of color in very similar photos and what people perceive and the comments that they get are sometimes overlapping, but I there is definitely a double standard when it comes to the color of someone's skin and the size of their body on how people believe that they could comment on that. Can you walk us through a little bit of like what that's like for you or what you think, that toxic kind of double standard is in the experience that you have?
Yes, certainly. So, in my opinion, I want to be honest upfront and say that my sexy pictures and photos and videos don't get a whole lot of negative comments from that standpoint. But I do know for a fact that there is a double standard because I've observed for a long time Instagram models that are also a lighter skin tone who are curvy, have the, really voluptuous hourglass shape, are actually being paid more attention than, let's say, a lady like me with my skin tone, same exact body, not as much. So I was, a bit curious about it. And I was saying, that lady right here with, I don't know, 10 plus million followers, 15 plus million followers, I don't remember exactly. Will she get that same following and press and opportunities if she was my skin tone? And the answer, unfortunately as it is, was probably not. Or else we will have seen many of these ladies looking like her, even better than her, society, in the eyes of society, with even a bigger following. But I haven't seen those ladies. As the ladies that look like me or have a similar skin tone to me, who have the same bodies as these voluptuous white ladies online on the Instagram model communities, they do get a big following. But there seems to be a very solid and clear glass ceiling there. Because I think the bottom line is when a white woman has this beautiful, curvy body, is seen as, oh my gosh, she's so special, she's so beautiful, she's so great. But you switch the skin tones around, it's like, oh, it's just another big black woman. It's just another black woman with a big butt and big boobs. So it's kind of like, okay, so, it's ridiculous, but you take a can of paint, you can paint it a certain color, then it's like, oh, more valuable. But the other person right there with the same exact characteristic, it's like, oh, well. So sometimes you'll see that their like models are very much overlooked in all type of industries. It can be from the more extreme adult entertainment to the high fashion world. And thankfully, now there are more models speaking out to it, especially in the high fashion world, that, hey, sometimes they only want two black women in the show. No more than two black women, or sometimes even one. They're like, oh, we got a black woman. Thank you. Goodbye. Irregardless of your talent and merits. And that tells you a lot about those gatekeepers. But also, we have to realize that who are exactly those gatekeepers? And sometimes people can be more prejudiced than you think. So, how much control do we really have over it? I'm not quite sure because only time can tell. But from my personal standpoint, I know for a fact that I cannot control the masses. I cannot control what they think like. I'm not exactly Mr. Burns in The Simpsons trying to, manipulate people or anything like that. So the best thing I can do is do what's best for me personally and know my truth, know my own value, because a lot of times women like us are so brainwashed to think that, hey, this girl right there with a lighter skin tone is more good looking than you. And it's all a lie. But unfortunately, too many people do not really acknowledge that it is a lie. So the more people keep acknowledging it over time, thankfully today, there's more acknowledgement that, hey, people with a lighter skin tone than me are not more superior than me. They're not so more superior than anybody else. They are who they are, and I am who I am. And it's this humanity that makes us one. But like in the beginning, people love hierarchies. They want to kick down the who's who and who's what, and they want to be on top of them. And that can come in many ways. That can come through fat phobia, racism, homophobia, and all the isms out there that human, keep within themselves to their own detriment.
Again, everything out of your mouth, I'm like nodding my head violently, like, yes, yes. And I think it was inferred by what you were saying, but I want to pull out, like, by, bringing in all the isms. One of the things that felt groundbreaking for me to learn a couple of years ago, but now is so inherent, I almost don't mention it, but I want to remind listeners that the double standard is driven by racism. And that doesn't mean that someone is actively a racist. It means that the systems of oppression that were set up a long time ago were built upon the idea and the standard of Black bodies looking different than white bodies. That historically, if we go back to like the Renaissance period, like long time ago, the fuller figure of curvy white women was something that was desired. That, if we look at like the statues of Greeks and all of these kinds of things, it is a curvy woman that is revered. And it was around the same time that people started enslaving and colonizing, that people of color and their more shapely body was then thought of as not a good thing. and a more slender, less curvy, lighter skin version was a better thing. And we can't let go of those systems. We can't unlearn that's what is happening in our brains if we don't like acknowledge that's what's happening. And I will say, like, I went to your other Instagram page and I was like, like, not actually, but, like, you're putting yourself out there and you're owning your sexuality. You are comfortable in your skin in a way that challenges my comfort, in a way that I'm sure challenges other people's comfort. And I like that it actively has me thinking, why am I uncomfortable with this? If I don't like it, I should leave versus like what you should or shouldn't be doing. And if I saw a white woman wearing what you're wearing and posing, like I have a lot of fat women that I follow on social media to change my perspective and mindset around fat phobia as well, right? Like I want to focus on people who challenge my mindset on what is okay to put yourself out there, and that it's not a shameful thing to have a body that doesn't look like the traditional beauty standards. And so I ask myself, well, why am I more uncomfortable with you showing that versus the other people that I follow who the caption might be, you know, I want you to be comfortable with your own body versus your caption is like, look at me, I'm owning my body. But either way, like, why does that make me feel more uncomfortable? And I think we have to, especially those of us who are white or who are not as marginalized as other groups, need to sit with some of those feelings. And they feel really uncomfortable sometimes to be like, oh, did I have that reaction because I'm participating in a system that is harmful to others? Like, that doesn't feel good. Yet at the same time, this show is a health and wellness show. Like I always say, how can anybody be healthy and well if you're in a system of oppression, if we're challenging your ability to participate in community in a constructive way, like all of those kinds of things. So I just wanted to kind of call out. I love that you you said all of that, but I just wanted to like fully carve out that thought process because I think it's really important for those of us that want to be allies, that want to do better, that want to break down some of these barriers and help others, that we have to learn to kind of sit with some of that.
Very well said. Very well said. And thank you so much for your honesty and your perception as well. It's not something I've actually heard before. So that was very refreshing to hear. But I think also that, sometimes women, when they see really sexy women around that are like definitely appealing to the male gaze, might be uncomfortable with it in general. So I think that might be part of it. But as well as I understand where you're coming from that standpoint versus, a lady that you're more familiar with being more, this is who I am versus me saying, this is who I am. And yeah, it's quite interesting because I didn't think about it for a long time. Because a lot of times, I just do it honestly. I either a male photographer, sometimes female photographers, or me do, this type of content. And sometimes I'm not quite aware that somebody's gonna see me and be like flabbergasted, really. Because it's like the people who are flabbergasted, most likely, like you said, are just gonna go elsewhere anyway. And I think sometimes I'm quite desensitized to it that whatever I'm doing is flabbergasting to quite a few people. And I like that honestly, because at the end of the day, not much I can do about it, and that's okay. And there are some women definitely who love it. And, that's who I appeal to. So that's for the better.
I would use the word desensitized. I think it's the opposite. I think it's more enlightened, right? I feel like whether it's purity culture or I don't know, like I wish that my response was different. I wish that my response was empowered or neutral even, right? Instead of feeling like, whoa, that's a lot of skin. Like, what does it matter? Like, so I like, I want to make sure I'm emphasizing, like, I like that feels uncomfortable and it feels challenging and that it makes me think because I know that's how we drive society forward. And I don't think that a lot of people would think, oh, someone kind of being authentic in their own skin and owning their sexuality could do those sort of things. But I just read the book Three Women, which I'm like talking Barbie movie. I read this book Three Women. Have you heard of it before?
No, I have not heard of Three Women.
Ugh. It is intense. I will say that it's very intense, and it's supposedly there was a pilot on Showtime and is supposedly being picked up by Stars, but it's about the sexual desires of three women, and they're all informed by trauma and society and expectations and all of these kinds of things. And so to me, kind of with all of that fresh in my mind, it's also really powerful to see someone shed all of that skin of, the past or people's expectations or society's belief of what is right and just be like, this is me and I'm confident in it. And that's not all of who you are. You bring a lot more to the table as you've already articulated. So I'm wondering if with all of that, how would you recommend the average person kind of tap into some of this sense of self? It might look very different than your sense of self, but where do you find power in your authenticity? Like, how do we tap into?
Ooh, that is a very interesting question. How do you do it? I want to really dive into details if I'm feeling like Nike and saying just do it. But I think it takes time. It takes time because I think our defenses or inner defenses take time to break down if we are willing to. And also, I want to say upfront that if you're not comfortable with something, honestly, just don't do it. I don't think it's necessarily healthy or pragmatic to push yourself in a way that you don't want to be pushed towards. And I think owning our own feelings is also very important because a lot of things are a matter of perspective. And funny enough, I was at a bookstore this weekend and I was going through a modeling book. So on my Amazon, save later list, there was this Naomi Campbell coffee table book. So I collect a few of those. And I was like, okay, this one I would love to get it later, but it was on the back burner for a while because, sometimes I get into different things. But at that bookstore, surprisingly, I saw her book. So I was like, oh, wow, great opportunity. Let me go through it. And I was very surprised that a lot of her photos in there were fully nude and topless photos of Naomi Campbell. And I'm not quite used to seeing her this way. So I was flabbergasted. And I do the same kind of pictures, which is really funny.
I'm
But
not alone. You said you're flabbergasted.
I was flabbergasted because I'm like, oh my gosh, Naomi Campbell's had a lot of nude photos in this coffee table book. I expected more like high fashion and gowns and whatever, the usual stuff. But it was like nude after nude. I'm like, okay, I didn't expect it, but this is beautiful. So I'm saying that to say it's okay to be flabbergasted sometimes and owning those feelings. It doesn't necessarily make you a hypocrite because we have different type of understandings and levels to what makes us comfortable. So one thing that really helped me is feeling inspired. So let's say I came across one of these Naomi Campbell photos and pictures. Maybe I'll be a little surprised and flabbergasted, but also the inspiration behind it, how everything is laid out, the creative direction of it. Because behind this shot is actually a side of beauty. So I get inspired by it a lot. I get inspired by photographers like Helmut Newton. Not Helmut. Yeah, I think it's Helmut Newton. I could be wrong. Sometimes I mess up the names. But a lot of his photographies are very erotic, very much adult oriented, but very eye catching and beautiful. So I'm always inspired by beautiful things and sexuality to a certain extent, to a lot of extent, actually, sometimes, but not always. And I'm okay with that. It's sometimes I like to shoot certain things, sometimes I like to shoot other things. And I think self acceptance is one of the primal steps to getting out of your comfort zone or not out of your comfort zone. If you realize that I like my comfort zone very much and posing nude online is not my thing. So the bottom line is find out the first step. What are you comfortable with? What are you inspired by? And just go from there. And are your fears stopping you? Maybe they are, maybe they're not. And it's up to you to decide.
I love so much of that. And I want to kind of reemphasize what I'm hearing, which is that to tap into sense of self, you're leaning into things that inspire you and then finding your own path on how to infuse that into kind of who you are and what you want to bring to the table moving forward. So I think, if I had to kind of parse apart and say, okay, what's something actionable somebody could do to really get in touch with their authentic self, thinking about what inspires them and starting to mirror or mimic or bring about some of those characteristics into their life is something that helped you. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, it is.
I love it. So before we go, I have one more weird question for you.
Worse.
Did you work on the movie The Lobster?
Did I work on the movie The Lobster?
Uh-huh.
I am not familiar with The
Okay.
Lobster.
There's another woman named Isabelle Miller who has an IMDb on the movie The Lobster. And that's a really weird movie. And I talk about it all the time with my kids. Like when things are, I have 4 teenagers, and whenever they're like being weird and I can bring it up, or if we're at the grocery store and there's a lobster, I won't spoil the ending if someone wants to watch it. But I saw that when I was, researching for the show and kind of looking into who you were, and I saw that and I was like, "Oh my gosh, were you in that movie?" Because that's just so funny, but that's okay. It wasn't you, it was somebody else. But I appreciate so much you being here today and talking about things, and the listeners are gonna jump into a show with Kai Washington after this to hear about the other side of toxic beauty standards in terms of, yes, women of color, but also the products that are specifically marketed to women of color to promote more European beauty standards are more harmful to women of color than products in that are marketed to white women, for example. And I just want to kind of let so listeners know we were trying to go full circle with this so that, there will be ideas and recommendations on how to participate as a community to like bring those standards forward and all of that kind of stuff as well. Because I still cannot believe that skin lighteners have mercury in them and, hair straighteners have formaldehyde in them. And these things that we know are terrible for health and are not only marketed to women of color, but are known to be harmful. And women are, or, men or non binary people are using these products because societal expectation is that they conform to a beauty standard that is outside of their cultural standard. And I just have such a angst and problem with all of that. So I want to thank you for contributing to your voice to this overall conversation and give you a chance to kind of add anything that we didn't get a chance to talk about today.
Well, it's really my pleasure to add to this conversation because I believe it's a very important one. And I'm also looking forward to hear more about the harmful products because it's it feels like nowadays almost everything is harmful. But I am very aware of, especially growing up in Africa, that a lot of the products are just sold to people in poor countries to make a quick buck and to hell whatever happens to them. And it's unfortunate. And hopefully those standards change.
I agree. Absolutely. Listeners, I want to thank you for tuning in today. If you'd like to keep in touch with Isabel, I will put the links in the show notes as well as I'll put a link in the show notes to the movie and the book that I referenced. I can't believe I brought up the lobster, but
Love to
you
watch it.
can now you're gonna go watch it. Just be prepared. It's weird. Isabel Miller, thank you so much for being here. And listeners, I'm gonna jump you to the I don't know, the Wayne world, like doodaloo, doodaloo. You're gonna go back in time and talk with Kai next.
Amazing.